You guys forgot to remind me to record this, but I remembered. That's all right. Question numero uno. Hear that accent? It's amazing. In the opening paragraph, Morton Borden gives success of the American Constitution in the first 12 years under the Constitution and the success of the fledgling nation to what and to whom? This is Morton Borden in the very first paragraph. You don't need to look at the article. You should just kind of know it. Points to be had here, folks. To what and to whom? Hannah.
Is to whom George Washington?
That's one of the two. Who's the other one?
There are two whoms? Or just part of the question? Oh, is it George Washington and James Madison?
No, but that's a good guess. I'll give you 1/2 point for that, though. 1/2 point. Let's see, Hannah. Yeah, who's the other one, Abby, for another 1/2 point?
John Adams.
You're right. John Adams. John Adams. John Adams. Abby, oh, way at the top. Okay, so George Washington and John Adams. And now what about these two guys? What do they bring to the table that allows this to be successful? The Constitution. First 12 years. This is a full point here, by the way. Hannah.
Well, they start to try to unite the colonies to move away from the Articles of Confederation to one union instead of a bunch of, instead of 13 unions.
Yes, they do that, but that is not, that isn't good. They do that, but that's not the point that the author makes. He says that there's something about these two guys that really allows for the Constitution to flourish. Abby.
Could it be that they both like compromised? They weren't directly for just one side or the other. They were together and did what was best for the country.
Yes, exactly. So the word for that is moderation or practical moderation. And so George Washington, he has this like leadership reverence just kind of naturally by who he was. But John Adams was a practically very moderate person who, even though technically he was in what party? For 1/2 point, what party was John Adams? For someone who hasn't yet spoken. Okay, Kaylee, thank you for joining us. What party was John Adams? Jaden.
Wasn't he in the Democratic Republican Party?
He was not. Kaylee.
He was a Federalist.
That is correct. He was a Federalist. So he was in the party of Hamilton. Remember Hamilton and the Federalists? They like kind of big government. They like, having kind of a national power. They like the bank. They like the debt that gives the federal government more power. They like the idea of industry and business more than agriculture. They like Britain and the British way of doing things and not France, right? That's kind of the Federalist position. And by the way, Jaden, you might have got this because Adams is actually a lot friendlier towards Jefferson, who was in the opposite party, than he was towards Hamilton, whom he despised. By the way, a lot of people who knew Hamilton wasn't a big fan because Hamilton kind of had issues. What were some of Hamilton's issues? Anyone want to throw out a Hamilton issue for us? And Borden explains this later on down the line. Abby.
Cheating on his wife. It's a big issue with him.
But even worse than that,
horrible.
As Secretary of the Treasury, he's paying her husband off so he can keep sleeping with her. Like,
it was horrible. That movie was wretched.
Exactly. Like, what's up with that? Additionally, he was conspiratorial. Additionally, you guys really want to know why Adams didn't win in 1800? Do you know why? Because Hamilton, sneaking around behind everyone's back, accidentally releases this pamphlet where he totally trashes John Adams. And that's probably the main reason why Adams doesn't go on to win re-election. And in my opinion, he should have. I think Adams is one of the best presidents we've ever had. And yet, of course, but there's Hamilton, right? Hamilton's kind of a booger. That's just his nature. He's a booger. Okay, next question. Parties emerged in the 1790s. The culminate. I don't know if I really want to ask it that way. After 12 years of the Constitution working, to quote Morton Borden here, after a fashion, there is an event that comes along that is almost revolutionary and almost causes a constitutional crisis. What is that event? I do see Abby's hand, but I would love it if someone else answered this because it's a really easy question. A crisis that almost ends the Constitution. What's the crisis? Almost takes our nation and flushes it down the toilet. Anybody? Anybody at all? Anybody? Abby, you raised your hand.
It was either like Jefferson winning the election or the Louisiana Purchase. I could not remember. Like, I mean, it wasn't, the Louisiana Purchase wasn't a crisis, but it did like involve lots of chaos, but then it ended up being a good.
Yeah, I'll give you half a point for answering that half right. The first half, you got right. The election of 1800, which eventually resulted in Thomas Jefferson becoming president. Okay, for a completely other and separate point, can someone explain why the election of 1800 was such a potential crisis that might have ended the entire Union? Kaylee.
Was it because of the tie between Jefferson and Burr?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Hamilton releases his little pamphlet, and it kind of ruins poor Adams, and Adams has to go back home to Braintree. That's the name of his little ranch, by the way, Braintree. Yeah, Braintree, near Boston. So he's going to go home, but Aaron Burr, who also had his major problems, right? Hamilton was kind of a booger. When I talk about boogers, Aaron Burr was a major booger. We'll talk about his boogeriness later, though. And Jefferson are tied. They're tied in the Electoral College, and then it goes to the House of Representatives. That's what the Constitution says. Excuse me, Corona. Not really, I don't think. Goes to the House of Representatives, and what happens in the House of Representatives? Someone tell me. Somebody who hasn't gotten any points yet. You guys can do this. You can answer. You can. I believe in you. I've got a Jamie and an Abby and a Haley and a Jaden. They have no points. Points are calling your name. Answer me, please. Answer me. Okay, someone who already has points. Kaylee.
There was a tie within the representatives too.
Yeah, so the Constitution said if there's a tie in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives decides. And so they put it up to a vote, and they vote, and it's tied. Burr or Jefferson tied. And so then what do they do next? They vote again. And what happens? Tie. Then they vote again, tie. They vote again, tie. And again, tie, and again, tie, and again, tie, and again, tie. 20 times later, tie. 30 times, tie. March 4th, Inauguration Day back then, today's January 20th. March 4th is rolling on down the line. It's coming up pretty quick, and we still don't have a president. You see what we mean when we say that the Constitution is on the verge of collapse here? Who becomes president? We don't know. The Constitution is not working. And finally, some of the Federalists are like, you know what? Why do we keep voting for Burr? Burr is terrible. And so they eventually throw their vote on the 36th ballot. Behind whom? Okay, this is like a free point to everyone who does not have a point yet. Jaden.
Jefferson.
Yes, Thomas Jefferson. There we go. Thomas Jefferson then goes on to become the third president of the United States, and he wins 2 terms. So now let's talk a bit about Thomas Jefferson. while they were running for the presidency, how did Federalists, the Federalists, especially, by the way, where was federalism most popular? Where was the party strongest? Was it in the southern states? Was it in the middle states? Was it in the northern states? You know, I'll even give you a point for that to see how much you know. Is it northern states, middle states, or southern states? Where's the Federalist Party the most popular? I've got 3 people here on the bottom of my screen who have not answered any questions yet. Great time to get questions. Jaden wants more. Go ahead, Jaden.
Was it the North?
Yes, you are correct, Amundo, again. The North is where the Federalist Party was the most powerful. And for another point, how did the Federalist Party feel about Thomas Jefferson when Thomas Jefferson was running for the office of presidency? And I don't mean just kind of like, well, I think they wouldn't like him. Okay, well, obviously. But what does Borden say? Kaylee?
I kind of feel like he's a Francophile, and I think he's gonna like destroy the entire country and like get rid of Hamilton's plan. And
That's exactly right. An uber Francophile. He's in love with France. Remember, he even chased around that married woman and broke his wrist. So there's that. They feared that he was an atheist because Jefferson was known as having, very quietly anyway, very antagonistic feelings towards Christianity, which he kind of did. And the article doesn't tell you this, but you'll probably remember it. So that's why I'm sharing this with you. Federalists were so afraid of a Jeffersonian presidency that when they had heard that he had won, women in the Northeast were literally building boxes for their Bibles and burying them behind the house. I'm not kidding. Many hundreds of women buried their Bibles so that Thomas Jefferson wouldn't burn them. No joke. That's how afraid of Thomas Jefferson these Federalist women in the North were. So they literally feared Jefferson. Meanwhile, how did the Jeffersonians feel about old Adams? What did Borden say there? Anybody? Anybody? Points are calling you. All right, I'll just share with you. Well, they were, of course, probably not quite as afraid of Adams because they already kind of knew what they had, right? But they didn't like Adams, and they wondered if really deep down, Adams was a monarchist at heart. He liked Great Britain, after all. And let's face it, John Adams has kids. Wouldn't it be amazing if John Adams crowned himself king and then let, of course, his kids go ahead and become, you know, the king, the prince, right? Prince John Quincy Adams, who, by the way, later goes on and becomes president himself. So, you know, he did have those ambitions, right? Will this happen? They were very, very worried. And poor old John Adams. I mean, you got to feel a little bit bad for John Adams. Now, I love John Adams. I don't know how you feel about John Adams. I feel kind of bad for him. He was one of those guys that just had no, like, filter. So maybe that's why I feel a great, you know, sense of togetherness with him. He has no filter. He just says what he thinks, and it gets him in all sorts of trouble. And his opponents hated him. You know what his main nickname was? What they called him? His rotundity, because he was fat. His rotundity. What a terrible name. And by the way, in the history of power in the entire world, was it ever acceptable to publicly trash a leader like that? If you did, what happened to your head? It was severed from your body. And yet, when John Adams is president, really, because no one trashed George Washington, right? George Washington was like, ooh, George Washington. Everybody, it didn't matter if you're a Federalist or a Republican, you worshipped at the altar of George Washington. We even had a song about it, right? Hail Columbia, sound the trump of fame. Let Washington's great name ring through the world with loud applause. He rules with godlike power. That's what the song says. But not John Adams. They had all sorts of names for poor old John Adams. His rotundity. They wrote in the papers, the Jeffersonian papers. And by the way, Adams was always very personally hurt by this because he liked Jefferson. He thought he and Jefferson were friends. And then when Adams becomes president, Jefferson's like, I'm going back to where? Oh, Monticello, where I can be with my books and my crops and my slaves. and he'd hang out there, and he got paid for being vice president for the whole 4 stinking years while he sat there at his house. Seriously. Yeah, that's Thomas Jefferson. And he trashes on poor old Adams. Adams was called old, blind, bald, toothless. Toothless? George Washington was the one who only had 1 tooth. It's absolutely nuts. And many people are saying, you know, Adams, you can't allow for this. Because keep in mind, like the First Amendment, the freedom of the press was kind of a new thing. You know what I'm saying? Like John Adams' wife was saying, you should punish these people because they're being mean to you. You're the president of the United States, for goodness sake, do something. They even called him publicly. They said that he was a hermaphrodite, that he was hermaphroditical. You guys know what hermaphrodite means? Does anyone know what that means? Anybody? It's not a pleasant insult. Okay, so a hermaphrodite is someone who is born without proper genitalia, or they're neither completely boy nor girl. They're kind of a little bit of both-ish, but not completely either. Now you might say, I didn't know that was possible. I just thought people who thought they were girls that were boys just made it all up. Yeah, sorry about that. I shouldn't have said that. Transgender. No, this is not transgender. This is like literally a genetic thing. And they called the president of the United States a hermaphrodite. And to John Adams' credit, he didn't kill any of them. Now today, of course, you can hear, you know, just turn on Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is not like Hillary. He said some bad things about Hillary, and Hillary said bad things about him. And did you hear what Joe Biden said about like Donald Trump? Now, of course, it's maybe not quite as bad, but at the debate, Joe Biden's last debate, he told Donald Trump to shut up, that he was the worst president of all time, and called him a clown. Okay, well, today that happens, and everyone's like, well, that, you know, that's the First Amendment. They can say whatever they want. But back in those days, the First Amendment was untested, and I have to give John Adams props for this. He didn't go out and hang the Jeffersonians for being so nasty to him, but it was the reality. Okay, continuing. You guys already answered the question. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but which of the 2 interpretations that most historians have, that either Jefferson's election is a revolution, that it revolutionizes America, or that Jefferson in some way sort of out-federalizes the Federalists, that there's continuity between Adams, the Federalist, and Jefferson, the Republican. Which of those 2 arguments did Morton Borden assert and then support? This was the question that you all just answered. And you can get a whole extra point for just saying which of those 2. Revolution, continuity. How many of you are a little bit afraid that you might get it wrong by answering? Does everyone want to raise their hand on that one? Should I just pick on somebody that hasn't talked yet and just be like, I'm going to give you a point no matter what? Abby, you're shaking your head. No, you don't want me to call on you? No? All right. Other Abby, I saw her hand up. Other Abby, the one that has, let's see how many points. So far, she's got 3 full points, and she's working on a 4th one right here, and we're not even to the main question yet. All right.
Was it continuity, right?
Yes, that is correct. Continuity. How many of you are relieved that it's continuity? How many of you are really upset that it's continuity? No one's voting. Okay. Good news is there's lots and lots of points to be had here in our discussion. Okay, so the argument is ultimately continuity. That when Jefferson gets in there, it's not radical. He doesn't do a bunch of stuff that would sound Jeffersonian. Instead, he does stuff that sounds kind of Federalist-ish. What are some of the things, and here's where we can really rack up the points. What are some of the things that Jefferson does that's actually pretty Federalist-ish? In other words, what are some of the major historical things that Borden uses to support this argument? Oh, come on, guys. We can rack up the points here, right and left. This is what he went off for like 3 pages on these things. If nobody answers, this will be the most quiet this question has ever been in all the, let's see, 13 classes of this I've ever taught. I should give you guys an award. Quietest class of all time. Anybody. He provides lots of reasons here for why this is his argument. A historian that just asserts something but doesn't have an argument to go with it is not a historian. They're probably a politician. Oh, that was terrible. Anybody? Oh, come on, guys. There's like half the United States at the time staring you in the face. Jamie!
He bought the Louisiana Purchase.
Yes! He bought Louisiana! We got it! Jamie gets a point! How many of you kind of knew that and you wanted to say it, but you were afraid? Okay, well, no one raised their hand, but that's okay. Okay, Jamie's got a point. The Louisiana Purchase. You know, now that we have the topic, why was that more of a Federalist thing? What about the purchase of Louisiana was a Federalist thing? So now someone explain that. And Jamie, if you already know, she could get 2 whole points here and catch right on up. But Jaden has his hand up. Jaden.
Was it because like the Federalists wanted more power to the government, so expanding the land would give the government more power?
That is not the reasoning, no. Although there might be a bit of that in there, but that's not the explicit issue with the purchase of Louisiana. How about I give you a hint? Does the Constitution say anything about getting new land? And so if Jefferson gets new land, what's he doing? Something that is
Unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional. You see how that's maybe a problem? Now, considering whenever Adams did anything, Jefferson's main accusation against Adam was that it was unconstitutional. Here we have Jefferson doing the exact same thing. He's out federalizing the Federalists by doing things that are unconstitutional. In fact, and considering that this whole discussion here has all of a sudden become difficult, I'm not sure if you guys will get this one, but Morton Borden points out that Jefferson is not only very aware of the fact that this may be unconstitutional, but what does he explicitly say to Congress when he encourages them to embrace this treaty of getting this land called Louisiana? Do you guys remember? Remember the 5th of November? No? Not at all. Just out of curiosity, did you guys start about 2 pages in? Did your mind start wandering? Is that what happened? And you kind of lost track of what the argument was? How many of you said, yeah, that kind of happened? Okay, so one thing that gotta realize here, that if you technically read something but don't really understand it, then it's like you didn't read it. You might as well just not have bothered. You gotta understand the content in it, otherwise there's no point. I will not ask like questions. No. So here's my thought for you. When I was in school, and this was early college as well, I would not, I would procrastinate. How many of you procrastinate sometimes and be like, I don't always stay on top of it. I would procrastinate, and then 5 minutes before class, I'm like, crud, there's a quiz. Oh, well. And then I'd open up the book, flip through the chapter really quick, do a very quick read, blah, 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 look at kind of the bold words, and be smart enough on the test to get most of it right. Some of you might be kind of like that. My guess is you're an AP, you probably are. That doesn't work here. I went to a history class where the professor would give me these articles. I'd have to read these articles. Then he'd ask one question, like, what's the author's main point? and flipping through and just kind of looking at that or spacing off while reading it, I would miss it. And I all of a sudden went from getting like all A's to getting occasionally like B's and F's. And it drove me crazy. And then I realized I didn't know how to read. And I had to start learning how to read for meaning. I could read the words, but I had a hard time understanding the concepts because I wasn't reading deeply enough. And so then I started reading the articles that he would give me 2 times, 3 times. I would take notes on them, like I would summarize each paragraph, like what is each paragraph saying here? And then I might even emphasize, by highlighting which of those paragraphs are more important and highlight the most important ones, like which makes the most sense of being most important. And then you know what happened? I started getting really good grades. Not only that, but more importantly, I learned how to read. That didn't happen until I was a sophomore in college. And for you, you're taking a college class right now. And guess what I am doing to you? The same thing. How many of you guys have ever watched the TV show Monk? You ever watch the old TV show Monk? Where it's a great show. I can recommend it. I think it's TVG or TVPG. It's great stuff. And he's always like, you'll thank me later. And everyone's like, no, we won't. So here I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you exactly what Monk tells everybody. You'll thank me later. Okay. So we've got the Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson is very aware that it's unconstitutional to simply get it. You know why? Because he sends a note to the Republicans, the leaders in the House of Representatives, in the Senate. And he says what? He says, please pass this quickly. Don't discuss it. Especially don't discuss the constitutional issues. That very clearly shows that Thomas Jefferson knows what? It's unconstitutional, and he's telling him to do it anyway. Okay, so there's one of the major reasons as to why Jefferson out-federalized the Federalists. He bought Louisiana in a knowingly unconstitutional fashion. Okay, now maybe this has refreshed your minds. What are some of the other things that Jefferson did that shows that he out-federalizes the Federalists and acts more like John Adams and like Thomas Jefferson? Kaylee.
He declared war without getting Congress's approval.
Yes! Oh my goodness, that is absolutely correct. Guys, today, imagine if, now Donald Trump, he's like, bring the troops home, but supposing he wasn't, right? And he's president of the United States. Are we already out of time? What the heck? Okay, well, dang it. Really quickly, then I'll just list them for you. Okay, if Donald Trump was to declare war today against randomly Syria just because he didn't like them, without going through Congress, that's highly unconstitutional. It would be very, very controversial. That's exactly what Thomas Jefferson did, violated the Constitution by sending our Navy, all of it, all 4 ships, to the Mediterranean to fight pirates, which, by the way, England wouldn't even fight. And England was the strongest Navy at the time. Okay, so that was kind of dumb. Eventually, we were actually victorious over the Barbary pirates. So it worked out okay, but that took years, and Jefferson looked like a complete moron for doing it, at least at first. Louisiana, Barbary pirates, something else. Jefferson wants to spend a lot of federal funds on building roads and canals. He doesn't ultimately get to do that because there's a new war that shows up in England and France, and so he's distracted from it. But that's one thing that he does. Now, that's all a Federalist thing. Democratic Republicans are like, no, that's not the Federalist ability. It has to be states and local governments that do that. So here again, Jefferson is looking to violate the Constitution. Another place, Thomas Jefferson, remember what was his main problem with Hamilton? Where did they fight the most? It was over finances and the bank. Not only did Thomas Jefferson not destroy the Bank of the United States, but he appointed Albert Gallatin to head it up. He strengthened it. Like, he's embracing Hamiltonianism here. Like, what is going on? He's clearly out-federalizing the Federalists. And then goes on, and so then, of course, you might make the accusation that Jefferson was just a hypocrite. And that, by the way, is what probably most historians argue. Jefferson was a hypocrite. He was a politician. He trashed Adams and then adopted Adams's ways once he got there. Our author says no. That's not the case. By the way, I'm going to be arguing when we get to Jefferson something along these lines, but it's not going to be what Borden argues. And so here's the main argument that Borden uses. Borden says, actually, Jefferson was always more Federalist-ish than his opponents realized. When his opponents attacked Jefferson, they weren't actually attacking Jefferson himself. They were attacking an imagined Jefferson. How many of you caught that argument towards the end? Okay, I've got 2 of you kind of raising your hands. This is crazy. You guys should probably go back and reread this, because I think you kind of missed some of it. And because of this, Jefferson was never even offended. They're like, yeah, they're making fun of me, but you know what? That's not really me. So whatever. So he shows up and he's not actually a hypocrite. Jefferson was always more practical than what his opponents thought. I'm not going to argue that. What do you think I'm going to argue? Was it a revolution, or was Jefferson a hypocrite? So we still have Adams to talk about. Well, I'm going to get to Jefferson here in a little bit. How many of you think that I'm going to argue that Jefferson radically changed things and it was revolutionary? How many of you think that I'm going to argue that Jefferson was basically a Federalist and he was a hypocrite? How many think I'm going to argue that instead? Okay, so I've got a couple votes. Why aren't you guys voting? 3 votes, 4 votes. You guys have no idea? You got nothing. You've been in my class now kind of for like a month and you don't have any clue. So just to let you know, I will be arguing very, very directly that Thomas Jefferson was a hypocrite, right? And it ruined a very good friendship between him and Adams. And if you hadn't been able to tell that, I've been kind of making fun of Jefferson the whole time. Now, don't get me wrong, Jefferson was absolutely brilliant when it comes to like philosophy and the Declaration and all that. But when it comes to like his personal behavior, there's major issues that I have with it, and I see him as a bit of a hypocrite. All right, guys, well, a few of you got some extra points. If you guys have any questions about any of this, please send me a message and we can talk about it. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week on Tuesday. Please be reading the next chapter. Chapter 9 needs to be kind of done sometime here. And then we'll have chapter 10 next Thursday. So a week from today will be chapter 10, just so that you guys kind of know what's coming on down the line. Okay, so once again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
I'm having some difficulty turning in the assignment. Like I press submit, but it just has this loading thing. So it should come in at some point. I might like try to unsubmit it and then resubmit it so it'll actually load.
Okay, that's fine. And if you're worried about it, if it's not working, you can always just send it to me in an email.
Okay.
Attach it to an email, and then I'll for sure get it. But I'm not worried about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.